Story 1. I was staying for a week at a guest house on some property in the middle of nowhere, Washington State. I was sitting on the porch early in the morning, drinking a cup of coffee, and I saw a young deer in the yard about 20 yards from me. I stayed still and took it in. Then a rabbit hopped in and they noticed each other. The rabbit hopped toward the deer, and the deer cautiously put its nose toward the rabbit. The rabbit got up on its hind legs, and they slowly inched their noses closer and closer. Then they touched, and the deer hopped straight up in the air. The rabbit ran in a full circle around the deer and then stopped. They repeated the same thing 3 times and then ran back into the woods together. This was before cell phones, and I am glad it was. It was something just for me, and I am grateful for it. Story 2. Back in 1995, I was sitting on the beach in Durban, South Africa, with a group of friends after a night out. The sun was just starting to rise, and a dolphin leapt out of the water. For less than a second, it was silhouetted against the rising sun, and then it disappeared. No one else saw it, but the images burned into my mind and will no doubt stay with me for the rest of my life. Story 3. When I was 10, we had a 14-year-old German Shepherd who was getting very sick. I was home alone briefly as my mom went to the neighbors to pick up a book. Our German Shepherd came over, convinced me to walk outside with him, started licking my hands, looked at me and ran away, jumping the fence. He never came back. He was so loyal and good that to this day no one believes me and thinks he was stolen because he would never leave. I am almost certain he did that because he did not want us to see him die. He wanted to go to the massive forest area and do his thing. I miss you, buddy. Story 4. I was stalked by a mountain lion when I was young. My family was ahead of me, and I saw it in a tree watching me. I yelled to my parents and looked back, but it was gone. I was under 10 at the time and am almost 40 now. I don't even know if it was real anymore. Story 5. At work on the railroad, going down the main line at 40 miles per hour, middle of the day, middle of the woods. Watched a massive creature leap from one tree line to the other, completely clearing a span of about 30 feet without touching the ballast. It was on all fours and muscular, bear-shaped but much bigger. The skin was fleshy pink. I jumped out of my seat when I saw it. My engineer did not, as he was looking at me while talking. I told him what I saw, describing it, expecting to be teased about it. To my surprise, he told me that 2 weeks before, a different conductor he was working with saw the same thing in exactly the same area. Never heard anything else about it. Story 6. When I was a kid, I would sometimes get up in the middle of the night and go downstairs to get a drink or a snack. On the way, I had to pass by a dark hallway that led to my dad's office. I was always scared to look down that hallway at night because I feared seeing a small child standing there. I have no idea where that thought came from, other than my hyperactive imagination. Fast forward many years, my wife, kids, and I were staying in that house during a visit. My daughter was sleeping in my dad's office. One night, as I was heading down to get a snack, I looked down the hallway as I passed by it, and what did I see? My child standing there. Scared me a lot. Story 7. 2 foxes ice skating on a frozen pond. My mother and brother saw it too. We watched for a good 10 minutes or more, sometimes on hind legs, sometimes not. They were definitely playing together and enjoying sliding around. Story 8. I once saw a cat walk up a street to a pedestrian crossing, stop, look for cars, cross, then walk down in the same direction on the other side of the road. Street smart cat. Story 9. I saw what I can only describe as seeing a star dying. Sometime before 2015, my brother had a friend over for a sleepover. Because of this, we were sleeping in the living room that night. We lived out in the country, so the night sky was very clear, and our living room had large windows facing away from the urban glow. I couldn't sleep, so I was just staring out at the stars. Then, I saw one of the stars I was looking at erupt. It formed a large, thick ring that expanded to several times its original size. Then, it very quickly stopped and collapsed back in on itself and vanished. Honestly, I know it doesn't make any sense for it to have really been a star exploding and then collapsing, but that's what it looked like. I still have no idea what it really was. Story 10. I saw one of the modified stealth helicopters that were used in the Osama bin Laden raid. I used to live near McCord Air Force Base growing up. During the 1990s, we'd occasionally see an F-117 or B-2 flying during the day. But one night in 2009 or 2010, I was hanging out on the shore of a lake doing teenage things and heard something unusual. I was along a flight path and near the aforementioned airbase, so I was used to planes and helicopters flying past. I'm familiar with what Chinooks and MH-60s sound like, but this was different. Something was off. That's when I saw two helicopters with normal lights break through the tree line. I assumed Apache helicopters, but it was dark, so I was just guessing. However, between them was a third helicopter with no lights at all, almost like the other two were escorting it. I know it's incredibly rare for any aircraft to be granted permission to fly without lights. Again, it sounded strange. I could differentiate between the normal thwump-thwump of the two escorts and the mysterious third craft that had a much more muffled thwip-thwip. In 2011, SEAL Team 6 crashed one of their modified stealth helicopters during the Osama bin Laden raid, and they had to acknowledge that the Comanche program was not as dead as we were led to believe. Ever since then, I've been convinced that's what I saw that night a few years prior. Story 11. Babysitting my brother's 1-year-old twins. Both have a couple of words, but not anything close to a sentence, such as mom, dad, cow, and hi. One of the kids grabbed my phone off the floor, and I asked for it back. He said, "Would you like your phone back?" Quite perfectly. I said, "Yes, please," and he handed it to me. No one believes me. Story 12. A severely overweight squirrel near my college apartment dragging a half-eaten Big Mac. Story 13. I was at my parents' house, sitting in the living room. They have a dog, and I was looking at her, waiting for her to give me her attention. After a few minutes, she looked at me. I wanted to teach her something unnecessary that my parents would wonder about later. I began to raise my eyebrows. She continued to look at me. I did it more often. She was still very curiously watching me. Kept raising my eyebrows over and over again for at least a few minutes. After staring at me for a long time, she suddenly raised her eyebrows. I found it so funny and couldn't believe she really copied me. When I told my family, no one believed me, and my parents' dog did not do it again. This was 3 years ago, and from time to time I sit in front of her, raising my eyebrows. But nothing happens. Story 14. I saw a raccoon ride a deer. I don't think it was consensual. It was kind of like an 8-second bull ride as it sprang out of a dumpster and landed on a doe. Both disappeared into the woods. I still wonder how long that little one hung on. Story 15. Came back from dinner with my then girlfriend, now wife, and our friend to our friend's house. The friend said, "Shoo," and we crept up to the window next to the front door. Her chocolate Labrador was lying asleep on the couch, where he was not allowed. She jiggled the doorknob for a few seconds before unlatching and opening the door. We went in to find the dog across the room in his dog bed. Pretending to be asleep, she went over and woke him up. He looked at all of us like he had just woken up, sleepily wagged his tail, got up and stretched. It was one of the funniest things I have ever seen and proof that he was smarter than half the humans I have met in my life. If we had that on camera, we would have won the $100,000 on America's Funniest Home Videos for sure. Story 16. An entirely white owl in the Atlantic forest, Brazil. Arriving home at 3 a.m., living just beside a closed forest area. The owl was on the sidewalk. I stopped to photograph it, but it flew away. It was probably albino or leucistic. I have never seen it again. Story 17. I was walking out of work near Seattle Center when a spotted owl flew right by my head. I have never seen a spotted owl in Seattle or in the metropolitan area. It was very cool. Story 18. This happened years ago. My wife and I were moving cross-country in the United States, and we spent a couple of nights at her grandparents' place in Topeka, Kansas, which is on the far east side of the state. We left after a couple of days of snow. It was a little cloudy, but there was no fog, and we were driving across the width of Kansas to Colorado, where we would be staying with my grandmother for a couple of days. Less than 5 miles outside Topeka, we were swallowed by the thickest, densest fog I have ever experienced. including when I regularly drove through fog-heavy Half Moon Bay in California. There was no one on our side of the highway, and no one was coming in the other direction for hours. For the first 3 to 4 hours, maybe one car passed going the other direction. It was just thick fog. We pulled aside once, not even to get gas, just to get snacks and use the restroom. The gas station was lit up, but there were no cars parked around it, and we could see inside. There were no people inside. We watched for about 10 to 15 minutes. There were no signs of life. We ended up leaving because it was so eerie. I cannot express enough how empty it was. When we talk about it, we usually call it Silent Kansas, after the Silent Hill games, because there was nothing but thick fog and a sense of foreboding. We drove for hours across Kansas, and the fog did not lift or lessen, and we did not see another living being. There were no signs, which I know are usually there, for gas stations and restaurants. It was just empty nothingness in the fog. Then we crossed the state border into Colorado, and within about 2 miles before even hitting the mountains, so we were at the same altitude as we had been before entering Colorado, the fog was gone, the sky was clear and blue, and there were multiple cars on the highway going in both directions. We both experienced it, but we will never be able to prove it happened because it was before the era of ubiquitous smartphones, and neither of us had the ability to record it at the time. It remains one of the most terrifying and inexplicable experiences I have ever had. Story 19. As a child, I was in the car with my mother driving on the highway as the sun was coming up. I looked at the skyline above the trees and clearly saw a meteor of catastrophic proportions slowly falling from right to left. It was orange and on fire with a trail. It disappeared behind the tree line after about 5 seconds. It was obviously some sort of illusion, as it was absolutely massive and would have been devastating. My mother did not see it. Story 20. Went jogging at 5 a.m. I stopped to say a prayer at a statue in front of the church. There was an old lady praying too, so I stopped by her side and closed my eyes. Then I heard the old lady crying, so I opened my eyes to check, but she was nowhere to be found. I thought I had imagined her and started jogging again, only to hear something behind me. I turned back and looked, and there she was staring at me. I ran as fast as I could. It was the most intense jog I had ever had. Story 21. There is a cornucopia on the fruit of the loom labels. Story 22. A lady in white on the side of the road around 2 a.m. in rural New Jersey. She wore an all-white long dress. The other 2 people in the car did not see her. I turned back to look but saw nothing. Story 23. I was driving down a long stretch of road around midnight. On either side, there was short grass and metal fences. I saw a man in a suit carrying a suitcase walking the opposite way I was driving. Thinking how odd this was, I looked in my rearview mirror and, poof, no man. He vanished with nowhere to hide. I am 99% sure I saw a ghost. Story 24. I was young, maybe 6 years old. I was being picked up from a friend's house, and the mothers were chatting in the doorway. I looked at my mother, and behind her in the sky, a meteor was coming down, or something like space debris. It was not just a shooting star, but a main piece that was disintegrating with many little pieces coming off it. I kept trying to tell my mother, but she was busy in conversation and told me, "The grown-ups are talking. Be quiet." Story 25. My cat was meowing strangely in my kitchen at night. I went over and saw some sort of orange bioluminescent glowing creature about the size of a coin. I chased it across the floor of my living room. At one point, it crawled over my hand and clung to my finger briefly. It felt like a mixture of an arachnid and an amphibian. I froze, unsure of what to do, and then it kept going. It got away into some junk in my foyer and I couldn't find it. A few minutes later, I saw 2 green glowing dots, like laser pointers, on the wall slowly following each other from the living room into the foyer. Then they stopped. One faded out and then the other faded out. To this day, I have no idea what happened, but I remember it vividly. No one believes me, and I would be inclined to think I was crazy if my cat hadn't seen the creature first. Story 26. When I was about 12 years old, I was out cycling without my phone. While riding over a bridge in the countryside, I saw something large down by the riverbed. I stopped, got closer, and I swear it was a 2-meter long leech or worm or something on the ground, slowly moving toward the river. I rushed home to get my phone to take a photo, but by the time I returned, it was gone. I still have no idea what it was or where it went, but it was there that day 10 years ago. The river itself is only 5 meters wide and narrower in some parts. For reference, this is in Croatia, not a humid tropical country where something like this might more realistically happen. It could not have been a snake because we do not have large snakes here, and it did not slither like a snake. It squeezed itself and then extended like a worm does. Story 27. In July 1976, I saw an unidentified flying object in the sky. It was like a red dot that zipped across the entire night sky in seconds. It did this a couple of times and then disappeared. Story 28. I saw about 6 or 7 whooping cranes fly over me in northeast Montana. I heard them first and thought they were strange-sounding sandhill cranes, but their white color and red markings on some of them distinguished them. I am a birder and biologist, so I am confident about what they were. I found out that one of their migratory routes indeed brings them over northeast Montana. Story 29. My 10-year-old daughter and I were watching television while our dog was sleeping on the floor to the left. On our right, we both saw a transparent version of him running down the stairs. My daughter looked at me, and I asked her what she saw. It was the same thing I saw, so I know I did not imagine it. Story 30. I'm experiencing déjà vu. I have many of these moments. I have seen events happen before, and when they occur, I am completely sure I have witnessed the exact same situation previously. Story 31. I would like to start by saying I know what I saw. I saw a big cat like a panther in Australia. I looked at it for a long time, trying to figure out what it was before it ran away. It had the profile of a cat, ran like a cat, and had a long, thick tail. I know what I saw. Story 32. I pulled up to a stoplight, looked to my right, and saw Kurt Vonnegut sitting in a 1980s Bronco. Story 33. A beautiful waterfall deep in a forest. I swear it was there. But when I went back maybe a year later, it was just a big wall made of fake grass with the highway above it. I could swear it was a gigantic waterfall. Story 34. When I was very young, at night, each time I closed my eyes, I would see what appeared to be the universe, constellations, stars, and beautiful space dust. Story 35. My girlfriend's deceased ex-husband. I was sleeping in her spare bedroom because she was sick. I felt something standing over me. I sensed a presence. When I opened my eyes to look, he poked me in the ribs. I knew what he looked like from pictures and later found out his ashes were in the same room I was in. I am very uncomfortable with that. Story 36. I swear I saw a lion from a hot air balloon flying over Luxor, Egypt. I got a picture, but this was back in 2009 on a digital camera, so the quality is not the greatest. Opinions are split. It is definitely a large animal. It does not look like a donkey or horse, but a lion just seems impossible. Story 37. A normal Tuesday morning on my way to work, I saw a bird surfing on the back of a fish in the canal. Suddenly, the fish attacked and ate the bird, and they both disappeared in the water. Story 38. My uncle was walking right before he died. He had been a quadriplegic my entire life. He was in an accident while I was in utero. I was very fond of him. He was very ill in the hospital and I was at home states away. I looked at the head of my bed and saw him walk into my room, wave and walk out. He was so calm about it that it didn't dawn on me what I saw. My mom called me in hysteria about an hour later to tell me he died. Everyone said it was a shame I didn't know him before the accident or see him standing. I see most of our family members right before they pass, as did my great aunt. The most heartbreaking moment was hearing her say, "I am hard of hearing, so that makes it really strange. It's your turn, old girl. You can do it." Old girl and weird girl were her nicknames for me. Story 39. My aunt and a hooded figure stood at the foot of my bed 10 hours after her funeral. I felt a sense of calm and just knew that she was checking on me before she left. Story 41. The ghost of a War of 1812 era appeared in broad daylight in my mom's backyard when I was about 35. I was wide awake, reading in a lounge chair. He was only there long enough for me to say, Oh, you startled me. He was not frightening, and by the time my brain registered, he was gone. The house was in Toronto, and he was gazing in the direction of Grenadier Pond. He looked troubled, as if he had a lot on his mind. To this day, I wish I knew exactly who he was. 2. A crow walking along the sidewalk stopped at the corner and actually looked both ways before crossing the street. There was not even any traffic. 3. A fairy. Yes, a fairy. I was walking along a path next to a creek near my house when I saw a thin brownish humanoid figure about 6 or 7 inches tall jump onto a tree branch about 10 feet away from me. When I tried to actually look at it, it was like I could not focus my eyes on it or even on that part of the tree. I was unnerved and left immediately. I used to go there often for walks and never had an experience like that before or since. Story 41. When I was very young, I was outside alone at my grandmother's house. Her house was nestled in the woods by a creek. I was walking back to the house after hearing the dinner call, but I heard something behind me. I stopped and turned around, and there was a big cat staring at me. I stood frozen, staring back, until my father came outside. I turned toward the house, and when I looked back again, the cat was gone. I tried to explain to my father that I had seen a big cat, but they thought I meant a small house cat. I was so young I couldn't properly explain it, but it was definitely a cougar. It had a long tail curled upward, tan color, and big paws. Story 42. I was at a beach at night and saw a white light coming towards me. First, it looked like a plane, but it was moving very fast. Suddenly, it burst into rainbow colors and disappeared. I do not know if anyone else has seen something similar, but I have never seen anything like that again. Story 43. I can't prove it, but I once saw a woman pull up to a drive-through window with no arms. When I handed her 2 drinks, she grabbed them one at a time between her neck and collarbone. She moved each to a cup holder, grabbed the straws between her big and second toe, leaned back, put it in gear, and drove off with 1 foot on the wheel. And when I say no arms, I mean no arms. Her torso just ends at the shoulder. I would never have believed it if I had not seen it myself. I talked to some coworkers and they knew all about her. Apparently, she has an Instagram and is a painter. It really humbled me and made me realize I take for granted a lot of things and complain about insignificant problems a lot. Story 44. I was walking in downtown Des Moines on my lunch break and saw a homeless man with a cigarette in his mouth. He ran up to 2 men in business suits and asked them something, but I could not hear what they were saying. Then I saw the 2 men grab each leg of the homeless man and lift him onto a trash can, where he relieved himself into the hole on the top. Story 45. Cobweb ludicrous soft rinse salt bear party payment mindless shame. Story 46. I saw a fracture in this dimension. I was waiting for the bus. I turned my head and saw the bus approach with a white pickup in front of it. So I looked forward and stood up. I turned my head again to wave the bus down, and there was a vertical line extending to infinity, like looking at the edge of a piece of glass. I thought my vision was going weird, and I was going to have a stroke or something, but I was perfectly fine. The bus drove through the line, and the line disappeared, but the pickup was gone. I looked up and down the street, but there was no sign of the pickup. There were no turnoffs or side streets. Nothing. I got on the bus and looked out of every window as I walked down the aisle. The pickup was nowhere to be seen. Story 47. While sitting in a parking lot facing a major street, I saw a woman running in regular clothes like she was scared. Then a car pulled up. A person jumped out, grabbed her ponytail, punched her in the face, picked up her limp body, put her into the back seat, and drove off. I called the police. They told me all dispatchers were at a driving under the influence check, and since I did not have a license plate number, they could not be of any more help. It has been 20 years, and I think about this situation often. Now I wonder, did it really happen? I know it did, but it is just insane to have witnessed. Story 48. I grew up in a less populated area, a 2-hour drive from Nellis Air Force Base in Las Vegas. In 1988, we saw black triangle jet planes in the sky. I was a kid who was a military jet enthusiast and could not identify the model. 2 years later, the military revealed the F-117 Nighthawk, and it matched what I saw. Story 49. I saw garbage in my bin bubble like popcorn in a theater machine. I thought it was a varmint. I kicked it over and nothing but garbage flew out. I looked inside. Nothing. Never before or since have I experienced such a thing. Story 50. Flying at 39,000 feet over India. I saw an orange light moving on my right-hand side. My first officer saw it too. We contacted air traffic control to confirm there was another aircraft in our vicinity, but they said no. Aircraft do not have orange lights either. Story 51. I saw a raccoon eat the remains of a fruit salad with a fork directly from the plastic package. Decent table manners for a wild animal. Story 52. I saw the ghost of a keyboardist friend about 6 months after he passed in 2019, sitting in the tour bus waiting for the show. I saw him in the reflection of the window. When I looked at the seat, he was not there. When I looked back at the window, he was gone. Try to explain that to the rest of the band. Story 53. A ghost appeared while I was at a bar. The bartender noticed my reaction and told me there have been multiple reports of the sighting. Story 54. A unidentified flying object. It was around the year 2010. It appeared as a green sphere. If you search the web, you will find fake videos showing exactly what I saw. But my eyes are real. I actually saw the fake unidentified flying object in real life. It was daytime. Story 55. My cousin and I were playing Halo Combat Evolved on the original Xbox when my character, the Master Chief, lost his helmet. We played split screen and I was run over by his vehicle, the Warthog, with the wheels running over my character's head. The helmet disappeared, revealing a low poly, not very detailed, head. To this day, we talk about the event and how no one believes us when we tell the story. Story 56. 3 years ago, on a summer evening with blue skies, the park near my home was full of families and children playing. As I looked into the middle of the football field, suddenly, there was nobody there. It was silent too. There was a large, glossy box-shaped vehicle the size of a van that looked like a massive iPod case. That's my best description. It had an oval-shaped hole, and the inside glowed with neon blue light. Outside of it, 3 men in white jumpsuits with black trim stood nearby. They looked like the Tesla spacesuits. 2 had their helmets on, and the other was holding his. He was a heavily tanned white male with short golden blonde hair. They were looking around their feet for something they had lost. I stared at them while walking. They all turned to look at me, so I looked away. When I looked back, the vehicle and men were gone. The park was busy and noisy again, with around 20 children playing football in that exact spot. Freaked me out. Story 57. I saw a star go out. A friend and I were hanging out stargazing, and I saw a star seem to get a little brighter. While I was trying to point it out to him, it disappeared altogether. Story 58. I was once driving in the hills in India, from Shimla to Chandigarh. I saw a creature, 4-legged, wearing white clothes with a lot of white body hair, cross the road in less than a second. The good thing is that I had 2 other people with me who saw the same thing. Story 59. When I was a child, my father and I saw a shooting star that traveled from one side of the sky to the other. The interesting part was that we were at his friend's party, and half the people in the house who were completely unaware were professional astronomers from the nearby university. Story 60. When I was working on a survey crew before they started using global positioning system, I was a rodman. I was walking down a road to a corner point for a reading. This was in a rural, heavily wooded area. About 30 feet in front of me, a black snake was crossing the road, took up the entire width of the road. It had to be at least 10 feet long. Story 61. This was maybe 6 years ago in the United States, but I swear I saw a fast food place where you could get lunch and a drink for under $10. Story 62. I slept on the sofa at a friend's house. I woke up and saw someone sitting on the chair. The lights were off, but it was quite bright from the street lights. I thought it was his father. So I said, "Hello, Mr. X. What are you doing up?" He didn't respond to anything I said. He had his legs crossed, was bouncing his leg, and just staring mindlessly. I went upstairs, woke up my friend, and told him that his father or someone was downstairs acting strangely. He was angry and told me to leave. At no point did I think it was a ghost. I just thought it was someone in the house being rude. So I went back to sleep. This person just sat there. When I woke up, everyone was laughing at me. I still thought it was just a prank. He had older brothers, so I thought maybe one of his friends or someone was messing with me. I was like, haha, okay, hilarious. You got me. It was only when his father came down and said no one was downstairs and that he sometimes slept downstairs and heard things in the kitchen that I realized I had seen a ghost. Story 63. A shipping container-sized chunk of rain hit the ground 15 feet in front of me. It was an extremely hot, sunny summer day in southern Maryland. The rain came out of nowhere, but because it was so hot, it nearly immediately evaporated from the grass. I could not even verify for myself that it actually happened, but I saw and heard it. The location was on a farm with mowed grass, so there were no neighbors or other people within at least 1/8 of a mile. There were no clouds, no planes, and it did not rain before or after the event that day. Just a single chunk. Story 64. I was brought to a home by a friend to fix a personal computer in Ireland, in a border town. I entered the cottage living room. On the old sofa was a case stuffed full of cash. I looked around and saw a well-used rocket launcher behind the door we had come through from the hall. I was there as a young information technology professional to repair a slow machine, which I later found out was being used for an unofficial bookmaker racket and possible money transfer operation. I did my job, said little while there, exchanged pleasant words, asked a few questions, and left as quickly as possible. I told my friend never to bring me back there again. Years later, the owner of the cottage was arrested for laundering money for a Republican army fighting British soldiers in Northern Ireland. Story 65. When I was 5 or 6, my family moved into a different house. For 4 months, my brother and I would scream and cry in the middle of the night, telling my mother we saw a man. I would look in the corner of my room where he would always stand. He wasn't mean, but he didn't look right, which scared me. My mother did some investigating and went up into the roof. She found a bed up there and numerous other things as if someone was living there. We found out it was the last man who ever got hanged in Australia, his hideout while running from authorities. We moved out of that house pretty quickly. I still remember that man in the corner to this day, 33 years later. Story 66. 2 juvenile Bigfoot or Sasquatch chasing each other across a mountain road about 8 miles from the nearest town at 3:10 a.m. They were not bears but looked like apes. This was at the southwest base of Mount St. Helens in Washington state about 20 years ago. Story 67. Not me, but my not quite 3 years old daughter. For a solid week in 1985, she kept talking about the angel at the end of her bed. Quite frankly, it frightened me a lot. The following Friday, we had a house fire and she died in her bed. Story 68. The fox that lives in the graveyard near my house. Once, while walking there in the daytime, once, while sitting outside at night, it ran across the grass and hopped onto the fence like a cat and ran along it. Once, out the front at twilight while I was tidying up. On another occasion, my son saw it at the same time as me, and that is the only thing I have to stop my wife from teasing me about it being a figment of my imagination. Story 69. Our 15-year-old daughter emptied the dishwasher without being asked. Others remain skeptical, but I swear I saw it. Story 70. One time after a Simpsons episode in the early 2000s, I saw a naked woman flash across the screen for a single frame before it cut to the news. Story 71. I posted this story a few times on Reddit. When I was about 8 years old, around 1996, I saw a strange being in my dad's girlfriend's house. I was spending the night with my sister and had to get up to use the bathroom. I saw a light on in the living room. It was a shape like a human, but completely made of bright white light. It was rocking in her rocking chair. There were no features or face. The light reflected off the windows and everything around. Even though it didn't have a face, I felt it look at me. I had the distinct impression that it felt surprised or caught. I stared at it for a minute, then, in a very childlike way, decided to just go to the bathroom. When I finished, the being was gone and everything was dark again. I have never seen anything like it before or since, but it was there and so was I. Story 72. On September 1st, 2017 or 2018, the classic Hershey's Kisses Christmas commercial with the ringing bells aired on some TV station. I never saw it again until the holiday season arrived. When I tell people, they never believe me, but I wish I had a cooler story to tell. Story 73. I see shadow people regularly. It started when I was a kid after sexual assault. I have attended and continue to attend therapy sessions. I am fairly certain that experience has led to my addictions and struggles. I swear I see them and would be comfortable saying that I have seen them too. They are not more pronounced under the influence of alcohol, tetrahydrocannabinol, psilocybin, cocaine, or lysergic acid diethylamide. In most cases, they just seem to be there. In some cases, they seem to take an interest in others. They have only appeared to take an interest in me noticing them on one occasion. This has been going on for more than 40 years. Story 74. I have had my sight shift in a forest. One moment, I was sitting peacefully with my boyfriend enjoying my surroundings. The next, the forest was crawling with life, like the noises of a lively gathering, with see-through beings crawling all over. It was just a split second, but reminded me of the stories of dryads and fairies in general. While my sight shifted back when my boyfriend started talking to me, that was not where the experience ended. For the next 15 minutes, we heard the rustling of leaves cascade. First far away near the edge of the forest, then closer and closer to us. Then someone would walk by us, and the leaves on the other side would rustle. It felt like an intruder alert system. This happened with several passersby. That was one of the most memorable days I have ever had in the forest, like I was accidentally part of another world for a moment. Story 75. A Parisian offering me, an American, directions without condescension or even being asked. Story 76. A big static green light over the clouds that disappeared the moment I walked my dog. Story 77. I have a vivid memory from when I was around 5 years old of walking with my father in the backyard of our house at night. I looked up at the sky and saw huge tentacle-like shapes moving, covering most of the night sky. It was very Lovecraftian, although I had never heard of Lovecraft at that age. It was probably a dream, but it became a part of my long-term memory. Story 78. Looking at the stars with my cousin when one started to move. Maybe a plane we had not noticed, right? Except it was not blinking, just a shining white dot. Then it took a 90-degree right turn, moved forward, and disappeared. We looked at each other, and he said, "Never forget this because nobody but me is ever going to believe you." I was 13. Story 79. Unidentified flying object. Massive. No more than 200 to 300 feet. I will never forget it. Story 80. My first grade teacher blew their nose into a tissue, then licked the tissue. Story 81. My dad was at my bedside with my great-grandpa, telling me he was okay now, not to be sad, and that he was no longer hurting. Dad had died 2 weeks before, and Grandpa had died 12 years earlier. I swear it happened, and he was there. Then I woke up. I was 38 at the time. Story 82. When I was around 11 years old, I had a sleepover with a friend. In the middle of the night, he woke me up, and when I opened my eyes, I saw a ghost behind him. Right after I saw this, he told me he had just seen a ghost. We freaked out and waited with our eyes wide open until morning. When we found the courage to get out of bed, we decided to go into separate rooms and draw what we had both just seen. Our drawings were remarkably similar. We both saw the same long wavy outfit, long thin fingers, and most notably, a head without a face. Instead of a face, there were pronounced wrinkles. In that moment, I told myself no matter what, never doubt what I had just seen. Naturally, as the years passed, I doubted myself more and more, but I continued to remember telling myself not to. Story 83. Unidentified flying object. Way back in the early 1980s in Hong Kong, it appeared as a bright red dot that hovered in the sky. I thought it might be Mars. Then it moved faster than anything I have seen since and vanished into the distance. Story 84. A lightning storm with no thunder. It wasn't far away either. It was pretty close. Just no sound. No thunder, but there should have been because that is how lightning works. Bizarre. Story 85. A grid in the sky. I know it sounds insane, but I was leaving work for my lunch break in 2021 and looked up at the sky while walking to my car. I saw a grid like graphing paper. It stopped me dead in my tracks. I closed my eyes, opened them again, and it was still there. The grid was green and looked like it was faintly vibrating. Then I blinked again, and it was gone. It felt like I saw a glimpse of something I was not supposed to. Maybe for a moment my vibration aligned enough for me to see it. I do not know, but I still think about it at least once a week. Story 86. I saw someone actually using their turn signal while driving. Story 87. I was at my friend's house hanging out with him, his wife, and a few other guests. I am quite sure I saw my friend's wife discreetly masturbating under a blanket while lying on the couch. But nobody said anything, so I just ignored it. To this day, I am convinced I was not the only one who saw it, but nobody spoke up because it was too awkward. She served dinner that night, and I made up some excuse for why I was not hungry. Story 88. A rat hopping along on its hind legs while carrying a whole slice of bread tripped over the bread, did a full somersault, kept the bread in its mouth, and carried on hopping without breaking pace. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.